most recent major exploit since WannaCry appeared in late 2021, and most people call it Log4J, but that's not the vulnerability, that's the software the vulnerability is on. Log4j is a logging software that in itself isn't dangerous at all, but I have seen some people mistake it for a Trojan horse. A Trojan horse, of course, being malware a user installs willingly, believing it to be a benign software. Today, I'm going to be talking about the vulnerability Log4Shell, and I will explain exactly what Log4Shell did and why it majorly impacted virtually everyone who created or used software. Even though I just said I'm not talking about Log4j, I'm going to start talking about Log4j. It's a logging software that works under the hood of major software companies, minor software companies, and companies that use software. Log4j is responsible for the error messages you get like 500, 404, 401, 403, 418, and you should look that one up because it's funny. Aside from the fun error codes you look up whenever you're experiencing a problem, it can also be used to log events that happen in software or even games such as Minecraft. Log4Shell surprisingly remained unnoticed in Log4j since 2013, which is a long time for a hacker not to uncover such a zero-day vulnerability, and makes you wonder how anyone was able to keep it under the radar. It was for some reason not patched or even announced until December of 2021. Apache, a well-known web server software that uses Log4j, gave Log4Shell a CVSS rating of 10, the CVSS being the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, which is an industry standard for the ranking of the severity of computer vulnerabilities. And terrifyingly for us, 10 is the highest score a vulnerability can possibly receive, so we're off to a great start here. It was ranked at a 10 because of a few reasons, one of them being it was a simple exploit to execute for hackers. In fact, you might be able to do it yourself if you just Google it. But it could also affect millions of software, some of which users probably didn't even know had Log4j on it. So now I'm going to get into the how. Log4Shell abuses a feature in Log4j that allows requests to access arbitrary, lightweight directory access protocol, or LDAP, and Java Naming Directory Interface, or JNDI, servers. The issue is anyone can make an LDAP or a JNDI server, and Log4j would trust it regardless of whether or not you want it to be trusted. Unfortunately, this allowed for remote code execution, which allows code to be submitted by anyone that can, in theory, do anything to your system. This is the worst type of vulnerability that can be discovered for reasons I hope I don't have to say. Users could be slipped malware, spyware, have their computers taken over, sensitive information stolen. Virtually anything a hacker could do, this exploit allowed them to do. And remember, Log4j is used by a lot of companies, especially big tech companies, which you probably use services from. What makes this a difficult situation is Log4j is used virtually everywhere, and it may even come bundled with software, so there's a good chance you won't even know you're using it. So not only is Log4Shell powerful and easy to exploit, even for people, frankly, less than master hackers, it's everywhere, and you may not be able to escape it. There's also, unfortunately, no simple solution to fix this vulnerability. One patch will work for some implementations, but not all implementations, because it is used in so many different ways by so many different people to so many different extents. Because of this, government websites in Quebec had to shut down 4,000 provincial websites to avoid being targeted. A Chinese hacking group called Night Sky have also launched ransomware attacks powered by Log4Shell in both Japan and Bangladesh. Even Minecraft was exploited. This is actually one of the first incidents of exploitation, and it could occur simply by typing a phrase into the chat. It's actually incredibly difficult to track the total number of people and software affected, as so much ground is covered and so many attacks continue to be launched, even into the first few months of 2022, when most instances have been already patched externally. Confirmed affected companies include Amazon, iCloud, Cloudflare, Steam, and many, many more. Most big tech companies have not reported any sort of data breach or evidence of hacking in relation to Log4Shell, and the big names I've listed have since been patched. But the fact that the vulnerability was there in the first place is pretty scary considering how much data you give these companies. Despite the fact that Log4Shell left our minds and the news in early 2022, on March 29, 2022, LaceWorks Labs found Log4Shell was found responsible for a total of 31% of tracked malware infections from the beginning of the new year. ThreatPost also recently reported that VMware Horizon, a commercial virtualization software, had been overtaken by crypto miner bots and backdoors due to a Log4Shell vulnerability. A backdoor is a piece of malicious code that can be inserted into a software to allow a hacker access to it at a later rate. Backdoors implemented because of Log4Shell aren't necessarily removed when Log4Shell is patched. keep that in mind. Because VMware Horizon allows for people to create virtual machines, it is used in a lot of corporate settings and especially in software testing environments. Horizon deployed a patch earlier on March 8th, but as I said earlier, that's not going to close any backdoors placed due to the vulnerability being exploited. And some companies are slow to even deploy security updates when they're given out. There is potential for VMware users to have malware installed on their machines if they have been compromised by Log4Shell. So I would keep regular anti-malware scans as well as switch to different virtualization software if possible. Due to the nature of remote code execution, virtually anything could be hidden in your system from this one vulnerability. As you can imagine, most companies have been scrambling to patch any software using Log4j, and many have done so. If you haven't updated any software lately, as in, last year, I would do that now. And if you're wondering why your car has a software update, guess what? Your car has Log4j too. My dad's fancy 2019 car had a Log4Shell patch. For those incredibly curious, no, it did not happen recently. It happened back when Log4Shell was still in the news regularly, as did what I would hope is most patches for Log4Shell. However, as we saw with VMware, Log4j can be sneaky, and not everything is going to be patched for probably quite some time, and we won't see the full extent of the damage for potentially years. We can only hope that by this point in the year, most companies have already patched what is probably the worst vulnerability of the century, and if not, well, you'll find out one way or another. Let's hope it's not by ending up on this podcast. Looking back on the beginning of the year, cybercrime absolutely skyrocketed due to Log4Shell, and I'm glad I was able to cover it because it seems like not many people are talking about it anymore, despite it being a huge problem still. My name is Chloe Tonis, and as always, thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Bite-Sized Cybercrime, where we covered Log4Shell and are able to look back on the beginning of the year with much more information. Thank you to CISO Mag, the CompTIA blog, and Stanford University for information on the vulnerability, and thank you to ThreatPost and LaceWorks Lab for news on the VMware Horizon infection. Until next time, update your software and stay secure.